this is news to my mom, but we're about to make a series dissecting the Indian culture, the South Asian culture, and talking about it because between the both of us, we've broken almost every taboo rule: lesbian, gap year, dating black,
Divorce.
divorce, leaving corporate America, to become an energy healer, leaving the energy world because white people are weird,
Oh, yeah. Acting. Yeah.
acting, pursuing art,
Being a musician and a drummer.
doing everything that you're not supposed to do while still doing everything that you're supposed to be doing. Those two things can't live side by side. And so the only stuff that gets noticed and gets seen happens to be the most sinful things you can be doing, which is being happy and following your own path and your own light. So, yeah, my name is Ayesha, if I didn't say that already.
I'm Darshana.
And that's my mom. And we have had our own journey too, in terms of just getting to a point where we can talk about so much and getting to a point where we can really honor and see each other. And at the end of the day, this is my mom. So I still get parented. But even that within our family structure and the questioning that comes with, like, what are you doing? How are you parenting her? Because even if my mom didn't walk her journey, I would still be the way I am. We'll get into it. But I wanted to start with maybe giving like a little debrief on just whatever comes to mind, whether it's what the South Asian culture means to you, what it means to leave the quote unquote the traditional South Asian culture. What even does that mean? Because we love our culture and we are so immersed in it. But because we're not immersed in it through this lens of how culture is defined by these values, morals, and beliefs that are honestly very oppressive, because we adhere to it through, like, you know, the texts and the very very sacred elements of it that are often overlooked and just forgotten about, that it looks like, okay, we're pushing away the culture, when in fact it's the complete opposite. I love my culture, I love where I come from, I love my roots, but to really love my roots I have to distance myself from all the things that it doesn't mean. So yeah, just a little introduction, whatever an introduction feels like for you.
Yeah. First of all, it's good to be chatting about this. I wasn't sure what we were going to focus on. Wow. Well, let's look at the word culture because for me, that really has become an epicenter of my life's work in many ways. Because as you mentioned, culture gives us the norms, the values, the taboos. It's the context in which we swim in. And when we're in a structure of culture, it's hegemonic, meaning that it is something we're in and we're often unaware of it. So I know growing up for me, I was 11 months old when we moved to the US. My parents, straight out of the villages. They were out of the villages to the bigger cities, out of our farming roots, so they were stripped basically because of British colonialism. I mean, really going back to what caused the migration into the cities. I think all of it's important because it even makes sense of the path we're on now. My dad would tell me that it was when Monsanto came in and they started spraying the farms with pesticides that all the crops died. So when there was drought, famine, and disease had spread, correlating with the farmlands becoming barren, that's when my grandfathers moved out of the villages into the cities. And that really changed, I think, our family dynamics and what was important to us because we come from a very collectivist culture. These indigenous ways are very natural. And I think that's part of the east to west migration, was living in this contrast. So for me, growing up in the United States with very traditional Indian parents, I was sitting in a bubble of contrast where I could understand these core values of family and what it means to be a part of something bigger. But then when you're thrown into the United States as this individualistic environment that's very competitive versus collaborative, it really creates this tension where you're trying to make sense of the world. And my parents kept me very isolated. So I think that's one of the important things is to recognize when we're isolated, we don't really get the contrast and the grit of different contexts. Like I never had dinner with any of my friends. I hardly had friends because my parents wanted to ensure that I didn't become westernized. You know, they didn't want my thinking to change. So I was sitting in between two worlds really most of my life. And then, you know, I had the arranged marriage at 19. I was still in college when I got set up because my mom didn't want me to get a sense of the rest of the world. She thought that would corrupt me or taint me in some ways. Like I hardly could read, you know, everything about my life was very scripted. And it was in college that I really started just to see different lenses of the world and to find myself more. But the minute I started expressing the desire to travel abroad after I graduated, to take, you know, exciting career paths and job, you know, even the degree I chose, my mom had steered me into. You know, I wanted to go into communications. And at the time, there were no brown people on American TV. So she said, you know, that's dead end. You can't do anything with that. So I ended up going into business school. I hated everything about it. And then very quickly got into computer science and business. And so that gave me just different perspective on the world. But at the same time, you know, I was still in this bubble. So I think culture really becomes the essence of it's the world we're swimming in, but we don't even know that that's the water until we have something outside of it to compare it against. And I know with, you know, your journey, I always wanted you to be able to have exposure because in exposure is where you see the contrast and you get to then have choice over what fits you, what suits you, and what doesn't. And that's a lot of our tradition is everything is interconnected and it's this beautiful interplay. And we're trying to find that divine spark and essence and allow that to blossom and flourish through us so we can be here to do the work we're meant to do. You know, dharma is a big part of our Vedic tradition, but in the way that our family structures are often designed, it's still very patriarchal in a sense that the women's expression is being contained. You know, we're not fully allowed to become ourselves. And I think we're offered now this beautiful ability to have contrast and exposure to different cultures in order to liberate what it means to be human, to be an Indian woman, and, you know, to just let the seeds continue to blossom.
I love whenever you share your story because I think it's also sometimes when people see your journey now or even over the past decade, there's this misconception of like, you've just always done anything. It's like, no, not at all. My mom had the most traditional, conventional upbringing. And because my parents are divorced, I got two different households where I got to experience that in one and then in the other, like with my mom. And even growing up, we've talked about you've still had somewhat conservative views at times. And so even my experience wasn't all free spirited, do whatever at all. I cried because I wasn't, even though I had a 4.1 GPA in high school, I cried my freshman year because I still wasn't that number one spot. So I still grew up with this stereotypical upbringing to some extent, but having both lenses were something that was something that was offered to me versus with you had to go out. And I don't even know if it's like you went out and found it, because it's more so when you have that, and I'll let you speak on this, but when you have that need to just break free and there's this unquestionable and undeniable sense of, no, I have to step outside of this, then that's that thirst and that's that desire. It's not always, oh, I see this thing that's really cool. It would be cool to just drum. I'd like to try that out. It's, I have to do this because I will die. Like, it's a very dramatic desire to break free. And yeah, you were in this isolation, so you weren't exposed to other things like at all. Hearing your journey, I'm like, there wasn't anything you were really exposed.
If I really had the ability to choose the books I read, like all my life would have been different earlier on, but then I wouldn't have walked the path that made me who I am today. So looking back, I appreciate it. And truly, I was kept from a lot of the corrupted aspects of the world. I was very innocent in so many
Both of us.
ways. Yeah. And you know, I'm grateful for that now because it's kept my mind really clear. And in fact, in a lot of that isolation, to me, it's me and God. You know, that's my
What?
anchor.
Aw. We cry a lot, just so you guys know. Just another taboo thing that we do. But I wanted to know and hear, because even though you weren't exposed to so much, there was never a part of your life where you weren't, to some extent, honoring to some capacity what you wanted to do. It wasn't as loud, maybe, as some of the choices I made, but there were things like, I'm gonna just drum on this pot because I love percussion. It wasn't, I'm gonna go to school for music, but there were these subtle things that you did, even like some of the interests with books and texts that you read, that if you could get your hands on it, like poetry, for example, you wrote poetry and you kept these little forms of expression going. And so having that connection with your intuition is what I feel like really drives that and
Yeah.
guides that. So how did you balance this lack of exposure to those things, but this inner drive to do these expressive things in your own way to the extent that you felt you could do it? How did you keep that connection with your intuition when you were raised in an environment where you were still getting arranged and it wasn't this fight against it because that's all you knew?
I think you said it earlier. It really felt like I was going to die if I didn't do certain things. Like in high school, I fought tooth and nail to be able to play the drums and join the marching band and all the different forms of band and orchestra. Music really has saved my life
Yeah.
and countless times. And that's, you know, why I wanted to give back to the community with like Girls Rock Camp. Because to me, we have to express, especially as women. I think there's so much inside of us that we have to make sense of. And there's this beautiful creation that has to emerge. Otherwise, we die a slow and painful death. So, I mean, having an autoimmune disease, honestly,
I'm laughing because we're not just speaking from a metaphorical sense too. My mom and I have so many health problems caused by repressing stuff, and all the health problems are, there's not really a cure for this. You're probably just gonna die. So it's partly us just being wired to be poets at these
I
dire
played this drum, I
times.
won't die.
But simultaneously, it is this physical impact and this physical consequence that comes that I think we're just so sensitive and in tune with. And if you look at our culture, y'all, do South Asians, are we notorious for having the best health? We're notorious for being doctors, but how many of your doctor family members are actually able to cure?
How many of them look healthy and happy?
That's yeah, and with all respect, I know that's like a very rigorous pathway to travel on, but only looking at certain things from the surface and this superficial level just doesn't do justice to the resilience that your body is enduring that you might not need. You don't need to be that resilient. You shouldn't need to fight tooth and nail.
That's right. That's right. I really think it was an undeniable pull into certain things like writing, like music. It's like, yeah, if I didn't do that, I could just feel I felt disconnected to my spirit and to source. Yeah,
Yeah,
really that simple.
and it's I love thinking about that part of your journey, like in high school, for example, where my mom was the poster child for an Indian child, like president of every club, best grades ever, wasting her energy on socializing outside of productivity. But keeping that flame of expression still somewhat active, I think all that shows that you don't, just because you're doing something that honors your expression, doesn't mean you're also doing everything that is anti respect. Respecting yourself. And I'm not saying the way you went about it is also what we should be doing. We shouldn't be needing to please and we shouldn't be needing to do the most in order to just have those moments of honoring ourselves. Because also in our culture, even if you're doing everything right, the moment you listen to yourself and do what you need to do for yourself, that's what's looked at.
That's exactly right.
But I wanted to say all that because you did exactly what people wanted you to do, and you were still doing what you wanted to do. And so sometimes there's also this assumption that the moment you do what you want to do, you're rebellious, you're disrespectful, you're not listening, like you're disobeying who I still don't know who, because I'm like, it's not your parents, because your parents are always talking about other people. Who are we disrespecting at the end of the day? These other people who don't care about us? I think for both of us, we've experienced that breaking point where it's, no, I can't hold the weight of being the best version of I can't, we both got to the breaking point of holding the weight, trying to hold the weight of what the best version of us looks like through other people's eyes, and trying to also maintain what joy looks like for us, because at some point you can't hold those two contradictions and honor, like truly honor yourself.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. I
You
think
can
that's
try, but that's being really dishonest.
that's right. I think that's the path of individuation, where eventually you have to allow yourself to be yourself, and it won't look like anything else around you oftentimes. I mean, a flower is a flower. It'll be similar to other flowers, but it's still its own unique creation. And yeah, to me, that really is the embodiment of artistry, is allowing yourself to be yourself, and not everyone's so concerned about what others think of us. And eventually, I think for me, now in my 50s, it really isn't a thing anymore, because I really don't care. Everyone's doing their own thing and making meaning of everyone else anyway. So they're going to think, their projections say more about themselves than it does actually the object of what they're judging, So I've just learned to allow myself to be myself. I know my integrity. That's the thing you and I always talk about. We've held integrity and values like to the nth degree. And as a mother, that's, to me, my role was to ensure you had strong foundations of integrity, of honesty, of honoring with respect, but making sure you're respecting yourself, because the world is going to demand things of you that are in contradiction. Like I saw this in corporate all the time, people selling their souls. And that's when I left. Not only was I dying of an autoimmune disease, but ethically, you start to see the impact of decisions being made, and you have to decide, do I want to be a part of this corporate machine that's killing millions of people? And, that became, again, my body rebelled, and I kind of didn't have choice but to leave corporate America at the time. But you have to decide, am I going to worry about what other people think about, or am I going to do what feels aligned to me and my spirit and to the higher spirit that I serve, Yeah, I think contrast becomes a healthy thing, because it forces us to become more of ourselves.
And that doesn't mean that it comes without guilt and without shame. And I think that's been that I'm like, I want to say that's been the hardest journey, but then that sounds like it's past tense. Something I work through every day, where I think for other people, and I've talked about this on my own podcast, not my Monk Life promo, that I have with my friend, but this idea of people thinking that when you're honoring yourself and doing your own thing, it looks so easy. It looks like you're just completely ignoring other people's opinions. And getting to that point that you're at where it's like you don't care doesn't mean that you don't care as in you have no empathy. It's, I can release this sense of dependence that we have on each other, and instead it's, I trust that you're going to be okay. I know you're going to be okay because I'm not doing anything to hurt you, because I'm so in tune with my values. And that's what I think sometimes gets lost too, is this idea. Like, for example, I took my gap year, and I was the most disciplined I have ever been, because I thrive off of autonomy and I know what I'm doing when other people aren't trying to steer me. I was waking up at 4:30 every morning, going for a run, got super into long distance running, going to the gym after, studying. I made like a whole schedule for myself to study what I wanted. I got business books. I was still learning business. I was going to my acting classes. I earned the most amount of money that I ever have during that amount of time, doing exactly what I love to do. Can't even call it work. I thrived so much, and I was the best version of myself. Meanwhile, I take a gap year, and the assumptions that people have of, oh my god, you're just drinking, you're partying, blah blah blah. I wasn't drinking at all, wasn't smoking anything. Still right now, I might have 2 drinks a year. I'm not the one to go out and party. Never been to an official party, never went to a single high school party, never went to a single college party. And all these assumptions that I'm like wasting my life away and doing all this stuff. It's like, no, you don't understand how hard I'm working and how disciplined I am, which are direct values that I'm taking from my culture or from my family, from what they want me to have. But it looks a little bit different because I'm not escaping, and it looks a little bit different because I'm actually more present with myself and more grounded, which means I have boundaries. And going back to the guilt and shame thing, I think that is it's a really tough thing because, again, it doesn't mean that listening to yourself comes without guilt and shame, and having the grace of, okay, I might feel guilty doing this because I'm doing something that looks a little bit different. And I do, although I might not tether myself to your opinions and your control over me, I do care about you, and it does hurt to see you impacted by decision, but I'm not doing this to you because my decisions are not as taboo as people are making them seem. I'm hanging out with people and around people who see me, really see me, who motivate me, who bring out the best version of myself, who don't let me stop and stay stagnant. And just because they are outside of what the culture deems appropriate, because my friends, my community, partner, whatever it is, comes with all these assumptions and expectations of how they are, instead of asking or wanting to get to know people, wanting to get to understand your career. That's the thing, is like, people don't want to understand, people just want to assume and have opinions. And that's where that confliction between, I'm irritated by this so I have no sympathy, but then I have so much sympathy and so much empathy and I do feel bad, navigating that balance, all those things can exist at once. And that's what it means to honor yourself sometimes, is you have to do things. The strength and the bravery comes from listening to yourself. It's not the strength and the bravery to sacrifice and to set yourself aside. And sometimes that's the misconception, is you're so strong because look how much you sacrificed for your family. But sometimes we sacrifice too much. Sometimes we're taught to sacrifice too much that now we're in other people's spaces controlling them because we never gave ourselves the grace to do what we wanted. And that's another thing too. I don't know if we'll talk about it right now, but just the whole jealousy aspect. And that is its own conversation. Navigating jealousy in the South Asian culture.
That's an interesting one. You know, that guilt and shame, having that master's in conflict, who studies conflict? I really needed to understand how these systems, these very oppressive systems, maintain control. And it's through guilt and shame. Mm-hmm. You know, it's how they keep you psychologically tethered, because we learn to hate ourselves. Like, you know, at 50, in my 50s now, it's, when I say I don't care, it's because I've had to really go, whoa, none of that was actually mine. It was all projection made out of assumptions that weren't even true about me. Like, no one actually knows me. So it was letting go of that sense of I've done something wrong, just in loving myself and God, and having to walk a path that doesn't look traditional, although actually I am nothing but traditional. Like, the way you and I ran our household, I saw that emulated when you took that gap year. We were always disciplined and structured. We always knew what was important for us to be able to set the conditions in order to flourish. And the conditions we were coming out of didn't allow for us to be ourselves, to express ourselves, to have feelings and thoughts, to be able to talk about things from the heart. You know, we didn't know how to do that, in fact. So, yeah, it's that guilt and shame really is the mechanism for propagating control and dominating. That is how systems dominate. And it gets cellular. I mean, that's part of, I think, the autoimmune issues is allowing that self-love to return in a way that honors who we are as individuals while still respecting the origins of where we come from. Jealousy is something to look at. I think that's where women keep one another oppressed.
Yeah, that's a really, I think I have a little bit of resistance even going into that because there's so much anger, but there's so much sadness
Yeah.
and there's so much control that I feel like, admittedly, that still has over me sometimes because it's harsh. It's this energetic judgment, and then to your face, it's, you know, the aunties, the old people, they still have their opinions and they say it in the most subtle, casual ways possible. You know, have you gained weight? The way we speak isn't always, like, kind of always feels like an attack.
It
But
really
then
is.
yeah, but then there's the jealousy through the talking behind your back that translates into rumors and it snowballs into all of these accusations. And that's, I think, where when it comes to people talking about me, I'm like, this is weird. We're family. I don't understand this. Why are you guys acting like teenagers? I've gotten to the point where it's like, okay, whatever. But it's that repressing and that competition and that need to always put you down that breaks my heart because it's like you're supposed to be you're my immediate family. And like you're saying, the way out of systems is typically through a woman standing in her power because the systems that we navigate are patriarchal at the end of the day. And especially in our culture, the gossiping, there's just so much. Like, I want to hear what you have to say about it, and then I'll add on to it.
I remember being a child, probably around 9 or 10. I was in the kitchen with all the women. It was one of those Indian parties, right? A lot of people. I was in the kitchen making tea. All the, my mom is there, all the aunties are there, all the men are in the other room. And I was watching the water boil. I was fixated on it. Number one, because I was probably a little neurodivergent, didn't realize it at the time. I was learning about the properties of water as that was going on. And all the women were just talking about everyone else. And I remember not wanting to be a part of the conversation and my mother just, kind of grabbing me and like, why aren't you engaging? Like, why aren't you talking? Why aren't you participating in this behavior, this ritual that we do? Fast forward to, adulthood. I'm in the household with, sister-in-law and all of that. Same things are happening and I'm not engaging because that's not you and me. We don't operate that way.
No,
And
we don't. But that's
you're
also because we
may
just don't talk to people. We don't know where. No, that's also because we're just so out of the loop.
I really, to me, it's wrong to talk about people that way. And it's
Just let them be them.
bashing. It's so bashing. And you get made wrong for not participating. It's like, they'll tell me, oh, you think you're better than us? No, actually, no. I love all of you.
My God,
What?
wait, that part, that part, because the same thing has been said to me of like there's almost this offense that people take when you don't want to partake in bashing another person. And it's like this is your best friend or this is the person you're closest to. Why would I? Because what ends up happening is it comes around, it's like Ayesha said all this. And it's like, why would I even engage and participate? Because that's your name, at least in my family, my name's gonna get thrown out anyways sometimes of like she said this. It's like I wasn't talking to that person at all. Like I don't even know what you're talking about.
These are toxic dynamics. It's just as simple as that. Like you said, it's sad. It's heartbreaking. And when you step out of that cycle, you're wrong for not participating. That's what I realized through all my years is, yeah,
No, it's weird because again, however you've experienced life is what you think the norm is, right? And so if you're brought up in an environment where you're constantly talking about other people, if you're brought up in an environment where the things you do, the hobbies that you have are like doing your times tables. um your reality, your experience of life is through that lens. And so for me, because I've always been in my own world, again, sometimes maybe a little neurodivergence there, but I've always been so hyper focused on certain things that it didn't even cross my mind to be so concerned about what other people are doing until that's introduced in my space, meaning until it's you're ruining my life in these ways because of the decisions you're making. Then that's where I really think about other people, and that's where like the venting sometimes comes from, but that's because it applies to me, it's in my space. But this idea of gossiping and spending all your time talking about other people, even spending all your time talking about work. I've sat in on conversations with people and I'm like, this is really your normal conversation? Like, what? This is so boring. And that's when you get labeled as being like too shy or too introverted. It's like, no, you guys don't know how to talk about stuff that's interesting and exciting and at the very root of it, just authentic and genuine.
yeah, that's it right there.
Say what you really feel. Say what you really mean, even if it is about me. Be honest about that. I'd rather you have conversations directly to my face than behind my back and misconstrue everything. Hang on, I keep getting heated and then I have to calm myself down. So I'm like, wait, what was I talking about? Oh, yeah, just that idea of normalizing gossip is not in everyone's reality. And so it's not that you're choosing not to participate too, because well, no, it is a lot of I'm choosing not to participate because this is wrong, but also it's just not fulfilling in any way. And the point I'm trying to make, with all due respect, is that people need to have a life
That's
and
it.
people need to learn what that means because an idle mind, all you do is sit up here and it's the worst thing that you can ever have. Like, find hobbies that are creative and that allow you in that space, not hobbies of doing stuff for other people solely.
You nailed it right there. It's people with too much time on their hands and their brains aren't engaged with anything. They need an outlet, so they talk about one another. And it's a Indian household. Often the women, they're bored and they have a lot to do, but nothing that's using that creative potential.
And it's all because it's all serving other people too. And so you need to find things that serve you and come back to how can you best be in your body. And I think sometimes people are scared of that because the moment they start honoring themselves, they also realize, oh, everything around me is fake and false and I have to get out of it. This relationship I'm in, it's not serving me at all. The only thing it's doing is pleasing my parents and making my family proud. Because the moment you honor yourself in our culture, the moment is the moment you realize that most of your life is scripted from not just your parents, but it's scripted from voices you don't even know where they come from because their voices come from other people. The voices they listen to come from other people's voices that they're listening to, and you're like, who is the source? Because it is not the root of our culture. If you look at our Indian culture, if you look at Hinduism, if you look at like the baseline of any religious text, like I'm still confused at where these cultural norms and behaviors root from because I'm like, sometimes it's religion, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's just, the immigrant mentality. But the baseline of all of that, I feel like, is trying to better life. And the aim and the goal is always to give the best life to yourself, and now it's to the people around you. But if you're constantly doing that, then that's serving no one at the end of the day because everyone is working for other people.
That's exactly it right there. I remember, I mean, a concrete example of me trying to, when I was in the marriage, trying to find that spark of myself again. I went out and I bought a guitar and signed up for guitar
So
lessons.
rebellious, mom. How dare you?
Girl, that level of ridicule that I walked home to, that's how they keep you in check. They ridicule you.
Which is ironic because every Asian parent is like, you need to begin a musical instrument. I'm going to sign you up for this and this. But it's like, to a certain extent, because that helps your brain with math, or like that helps you with discipline. And so, even taking these things, so I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to also make a note of that you're in all these things when you're little, but then you have to quit it all up until a
That's it.
certain point. It's like, get in all the extracurriculars, blah, 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 blah. But make sure that you quit all of them by this stage of life. And so, it's everything you do is on someone else's terms and for an agenda and a reason. Hang on, that's my bell. 1 second. I got everyone at work copies of my book. And oh, wait, real quickly. Today is the 1 year since I released my book, and I kept having redelivery for my package because they kept missing me.
I was thinking about your book. How lovely.
Yeah, today's 1 year. So for work, I had ordered everyone copies as like a end of the year thank you
How
kind of thing.
nice.
Okay, speaking about authenticity, real quick promo. I wrote a book, and today is actually the 1 year since I wrote it, and this is I got a copy for myself because I didn't actually have a copy for myself because I kept giving my copies away. But it's called Embracing Blue, and it's about owning what makes you you and understanding that when you embrace your voice and authenticity, then it affects everyone around you. How timely. This is a sign, not necessarily to buy my book. You can buy it if you want. I'll put the link in the description, but to honor and embrace you. That's the sign.
To me, that's what life is about. Actually, it was the day you were born that it was like all of a sudden I knew I had to reclaim what it was to be a woman so you didn't have to walk the path that I did. Because it was that moment when they were like, oh, it's a girl. I'm like, wait, what? Like, it was like a big bell knocked me in the head, and I saw my life and how I was being perceived in a whole different light. And I was like, I promise you, like it's in my poetry book, I promised you and God, I was like, we are breaking this cycle. I didn't know it was going to get so ugly and messy in the process.
Yeah, no, that's the thing is I'm like, why do we sign up for doing all the lessons right now? Because we're really trying not to reincarnate it. We're trying to learn all of them right now. But the thing is I think that's important to note because when you start to uncover one thing or when you honor one truth, it does spiral and it does get a little messy and it does get a little chaotic, but when you uncover one truth, like you have to just start dismantling everything because you really have no choice but to follow authenticity. And some may ask, what is the point of following that authentic spark? Because all it does is hurts parents, hurts family. It just causes a lot more mess that could just be solved if you just played your guitar in your own free time and didn't make a whole scene of it. So, like, what is the point? Because we could sit here all day and obviously the point is your happiness, your joy, but in a culture that's so rooted in, okay, but how does this serve the people around me? Because there's more to sacrifice when other people's opinions are in play, at least in our culture. I feel like that people are willing to sacrifice their own happiness if it means keeping the peace of the environment around them. So what is the reward for following your own voice if your own happiness? Like some people, especially with the amount of strength that we have within us, we can tolerate a lot. And so we can find happiness, we could find joy in maybe anything we do to a certain extent, but that real soul fulfilling joy that some people might have never even experienced because they've always been walking in someone else's shadow. So, what is the benefit for those people, for those voices that might be okay with being a little bit hidden if it means protecting the peace, quote unquote, this idea of peace, even if it's not genuine?
I think you've touched on this before. It's a false peace. And it goes back to your book, Embracing Blue, because when people become themselves, it ripples. What do we see in the world right now? Massive depression. We see people collapsing in on themselves and they take others with them. You know, in my conflict studies, that's what I really realized is we perpetuate systems to keep the peace, but at what cost? What is the cost of a half-lived life? You know, my favorite poem is Langston Hughes' Dream Deferred. What happens to a dream deferred? And the last line is, or does it explode? You know, like what happens when we aren't the flowers that bloom? We become dead fields. You know, going back to what happened in the villages, the crops died and there was feast, famine, and disease. We're no different. If we don't flourish as individuals, it was that day you were born that I had my own awakening of I have to change these circumstances so you would not live oppressed, as I realized in that moment I was living oppressed. I didn't want to hand that life to you. So I think a lot of people can choose it, but they're perpetuating the system that is going to create depression. If you're not fulfilled inside, eventually we take that toxicity out on others. It becomes projected. People will gossip and they're going to shame and blame and judge because they're not in themselves. So you end up living in a toxic world because people aren't happy within themselves. They're not finding that expression. And when I say happy, I'm not talking la 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 la. No,
Happy does not, sorry. Happy does not mean easy.
there's nothing easy.
Nothing is ever easy. And that's the other thing sometimes I have to also explain to people. I'm like, I'm not looking for ease because otherwise I would not be an artist paving my own path.
Growth
It's
is
not,
uncomfortable.
but there's the analogy I like to use sometimes is I work with children. Right now I'm like in education. And I am so tired at the end of the day, so drained. There's a difference though in coming home and being so physically exhausted and needing to escape and do these things that are harmful because your soul is depleted versus I am exhausted, but my soul is so fulfilled that, well, I'm so tired, I want to go to sleep, but I have all this energy and inspiration to do something with it and to do what I want to do with my life and continue doing what I want to do with my life. There's a difference between being tired and soul drained and tired and my soul is fulfilled. Neither one of those paths are easy. And it's not going to be again. It's life. Like, get over it.
Growth.
It's not going to be easy, but there's an ease that you can allow when you walk your own path. And those words, I'm like trying to think of even the Gujarati words for ease and easy. I'm like, do we even have
That's a good question.
ease?
No, I don't think we do. Because, growth is grit. And there's a constant grief that comes with growth because there's a letting go and there's a new way of becoming. And there's nothing comfortable or easy about it. Nothing is comfortable and easy about it. But there's a deeper fulfillment that begins to emerge when you're on whatever path this is. But I think we live in a culture and a society that people are very disconnected from themselves. And I think that's why you and we find the circles and the people who have that spark of inspiration. I think that's the key word, is when people are inspired, that's what's infectious. When I'm banging on a drum, it's infectious. People find themselves in that rhythm. And to me, that's the gift. I just want to be a gift to the people I'm around, but I have to cultivate that within myself. And it's gritty and it's ugly and it's messy, but then you actually have something to offer versus being just an empty shell of being a good, keeping the peace. What I learned about in conflict is something around the idea of it's not peace that we're seeking. It's because growth comes with conflict oftentimes because you're stretching and you're morphing, and that is going to affect the systems and the people around you. So even like the idea of what is peace has to really be examined.
And that's such a the idea of what we think peace means that's such a Western interpretation of it, I feel like, too, because in ritualistic Indian dance, we examine the archetype that deals with chaos and disorder because that's a key part of living is this chaos and disorder. But we also examine it through the lens of the peace is the groundedness and the embodying and the embracing and acceptance of it. It's not the place of this doesn't exist in my life anymore. And I'm just sitting here like, Zen, no, you're probably high and on drugs if that's what you're experiencing all the time. But there's this level of embracing and accepting everything that comes with it and lack of resistance. It doesn't mean that you're not, conflict doesn't mean, um, conflict is acknowledging and holding different perspectives as truth. And it can be that way, and you can have a lack of resistance with those things. You can accept that I can feel guilty and shameful and still joyous in my decision all at once.
That's it right there.
Is embracing and embodying and integrating all those truths at once and not fighting anything anymore. And I think that at the end of the day, when we learn to do that and when we relearn how to navigate those conflicting thoughts and that conflict within, then that allows us to have fruitful relationships with those around us. Because we're not trying to get to the place where we're honoring ourselves so we cut off every single person. No, I love my family. I love my family so much. It hurts that I have to keep a distance sometimes, but I have to honor my truth in order to then navigate and come back to the relationships that I see I want in my life and be able to be an honest version of myself, because there's only so much I can take of showing up as 20% of me. Yeah. And having the 80% that is the most me pushed aside because it's just not even worth bringing her in.
That's right. I resonate with that.
I think that's a good place to wrap up this conversation and then continue our series on our next episode. But yeah, is there anything else that you just wanted to say? Or any parting words of wisdom that you wanted to give people? Because this is still Mama at the end of the day. Mamas always have words of wisdom, even if you don't want to hear them. I've learned. I'm like, that's true. What you're saying is accurate. That's not comforting.
What did I remember, was it in middle school where you hated me for saying the words, I'm sorry, honey, it doesn't get easier.
Yeah,
Just
no,
your perspective will change.
Yeah, I was going through something. This is when I was 14, 15 years old. I was really going through it. And all I needed was, it's okay, it's gonna get better. And instead, I'm sitting in the car wanting to be unbothered and not talked to. And my mom looks at me, honey, the situation itself is not gonna get better. Your perspective on it will. And I was like, that is the most unhelpful thing to hear, because I'm going through it in the moment. I don't care about my perspectives later on. Tell me it's okay now. But it's true. At the end of the day, the more I've grown, the more I've really seen the aftermath of growing in life and realizing, yeah, the situations actually get worse. The circumstances get more intense. You have more layers. Adulting sucks. And there are more things to deal with. But my ability to navigate through things has come with so much more ease because I have such different perspectives. And part of that is allowing different perspectives into your space. And again, not resisting.
Yeah, that's it. I think right there. Not resisting leads to true authenticity. We're all just trying to find ourselves, and to love others around us requires us to love ourselves. And we don't come from places that nurture that true sense of self.
And with that being said, too, we walking the path and going through the difficulties and the obstacles, when it means honoring yourself, it's actually not as scary as it seems. It's scarier when you take yourself out of it and when you don't stay connected to your reasons and your whys and your intention behind it. So when you honor your intention, while things may get messy, it's not as hard as you think it is, because you know in your heart why you're doing something, and that comes with love for you and that comes with love for other people. So while the circumstances might not get easier, whatever that means to you, there is so much ease that comes with it, because there is a joy and a lightness that you can tap into amidst everything.
Totally. Truth is hard to hold, and it gets heavy over time. one of the poems out of my book, because that's what I realized. Truth is going to hurt a lot of people that want to maintain a false reality. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to link, this is the best
Oh.
poetry book in the entire world, and I will link this below in addition to Embracing Blue. But I will.
Aisha wrote the foreword to the book, and it's
I
my favorite part
did.
of the book is the
Aww.
foreword.
Yeah, you could definitely, you should check at least this one out because there's something very magical about the way my mom writes in her poetry, and it really does touch on so much of what we've talked about, but so much more because we only scratched the surface. But getting to know my mom's journey, I think any person can find themselves reflected in your journey because for some reason you chose to do everything in the world. I will link both of our information below, and we can't wait to talk next time. And I don't know, we'll see. I don't know how to do outros. Thank you
Aw,
so much for watching.
thank you. I love you.
Love you.